Hello, I'm Aaron Ackelmeyer, and I'm here to talk to you about Docker. I will be approaching this by asking four simple questions. What is Docker? Why do we care? How does it work? And how does it help us? To kick things off, I'm going to start with what is Docker? Docker is a system of breaking down a computer into a collection of smaller systems called containers. These systems are isolated from each other, just like shipping containers would be on a barge. It gives each application or group of applications their own space to run in. That way they can run with safety. It's also a way of versioning an application with a base operating system and dependencies. So why do we care? Well, Docker allows us to run applications more securely by segmenting them into their own space. It also allows us to set up guardrails for our own applications so we don't have to worry about unintended side effects on the system. We can ship these containers across machines, which allows us to copy our application and environment to other systems. Our containers are completely portable and will run correctly on any Linux system, the same as they would on our own. This gives deployment and IT much more flexibility when building their own systems. With proper application design, the application version features allow us to roll back to a previous version fairly easily when things go wrong with an upgrade. And Docker's design has allowed a larger ecosystem of applications to be built on top of it, creating an environment where scaling applications isn't a question of if, it's a question of how. So with that out of the way, let's look at how this all works. So when you issue any commands on the Docker command line interface, it will communicate with your Docker host system. The host will then download or upload images on centralized registries, create container images off Docker files, and create containers from local images and run commands within those containers. Each container is just an environment with a file system layer overlaid on top of an image, and each image is just a collection of layers overlaid on top of each other. So in a way, you could say containers are like onions because they have layers. So now we've got all of the background in place. Let's show how we're going to use Docker. I have this Hello World Node application. It's just a simple Node HTTP application, which just responds with hello world to every request. Fairly simple server. I've also got this Docker file here that does a from statement. So the from statement gives your base layer. So we're going to start from the Node 4.2 container, which comes from the Docker main repository. We're going to copy everything in this folder, so dot, into the /src folder in the container. Then we're going to run cd/src and npm install. That will go into our source folder and install all of our dependencies. We're going to expose port 4000, which is what our server's running on. And we're going to set up the command, the initial start command for the container, to node server or src server.js, so our server starts up and starts serving our little hello world page. To build this container, we need to cd into the correct folder, and we run docker build -t, which gives it a tag. So I'm going to give it hello node, and dot, meaning build the current directory. I'm using sudo because that's how I have my system set up. You can configure Docker so that you don't have to use sudo to run Docker commands. So it's going to start with our from Node 4.2. Because I have it already downloaded, it was nice and quick. Normally it would download that base image. It copied everything in. And this is our npm info output from our npm install. Exposes our port and setting up the command. So now that we have this container built, we can do sudo docker run to run the container. We're going to set up a port. So when you do the expose, it only exposes that port to the inside of the Docker system. By doing a -p, we also expose it to the outside world. And I'm going to give the hello node as the container that we want to run. So this is going to start up. We get our server running log, and I'm going to pull up a browser, open up that page, and we see our hello world message. I'm just going to hit a Control-C to kill this, and we get our cut interrupt signal message, and it exits. If I wanted to run that in daemon or background mode, you do sudo docker run, give it the same port. I'm going to give it a name. This will be useful when referring to the container later. I'm going to set it in detached mode, which will detach it from my terminal, and give the same container name. So it gives us this long thing here. This is actually a hash, just like your Git hashes. If I do sudo docker ps, you'll see our hello node container running alongside a few other containers I have running. If I do docker logs, I can get, hello node container. I can get the output of the logs from our container. And if I refresh here, we can see that the server is running. If I wanted to stop that container, use docker stop. This does take a moment because it issues some signals to your process and waits for it to close. And if I do a docker logs, it does use a different signal as Control-C, so you don't get our message from the COT signal. But if we do our PS, you can see it's missing from this list because it's not running. If I do a PS-A, that will show all containers. And you see that hello node container we started in the background has been left there. Also, this goofy container here is actually that first command we ran that was running it on the terminal, which was also left here. If I wanted to remove those, I just use a docker rm command and give them the names. And it will remove those so that when we do our ps-a again, they are now gone. That's pretty much the basics of using Docker. Let's go deeper into a Docker file now. And I will create a Docker file for the Juke React workshop that we worked on earlier. So I'm going to create a new doc file, and it has to be named Docker file. So I'm going to start from Node 6, because our Juke does like Node 6 a bit better than the older 4. I'm going to copy the current folder into /src. I'm going to run cd src. And I'm only going to run the production dependencies. I'm going to set up some environment variables for our Juke React. Now, this is the URI for a Postgres database that I have running within Docker. This is only part of the picture. We will complete this picture a little later on for getting the connection working all the way through. I'm going to expose 1337, which is the port that our server is running on. I'm going to set workdir to /src. This sets it so that the directory everything's run from within Docker is this /src folder. And I'm going to set up my initial command. Now, one extra feature of Docker, we can set up a Docker ignore file. And this will instruct Docker to ignore specific files. Normally, I would ignore the node modules folder, which will, that way we only install our production dependencies into the container. I'm going to leave this commented out so that we can speed up the build process a bit. And I'm going to ignore the browser React folder because that folder contains all of our React code, which should be in our bundle, which I have pre-built. So to build this, I'm going to change into our Juke React folder and run very similar commands. So sudo docker build -t Juke React. So I gave it a different tag than I did before. That way, each different project would get its own tag. You can also put a colon and put a version number on the end. That's the versioning feature I mentioned earlier. Most projects that are up on Docker Hub do follow a form of Semver. So you'll have like Node 6 that you see here. That will give the latest version of Node 6. If I did like 6.3, that would give 6.3, the latest 6.3, and then you could do all three. So you can just tack a version onto the end of there, and it will just group all of those versions together when you are downloading. When you pull without a version number, it just grabs the whatever the default is that has been configured on the remote repository. So as you can see, it's running our Docker commands. It did the copy, which took a little bit because we have a bit more to this project. It's running the npm install, which was nice and short because I did allow it to copy node modules in. It's setting up our environment variables, exposing our ports, setting up the work directory, and we've successfully built. I'm going to do a Docker PS because I need some information out of here. So this is my Postgres database that I already have running within Docker. So I do need this name for the next step. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to do Docker run the same -p. Then I'm going to link this Postgres container under the name Postgres. The important thing is that last piece matches the name on the URI that we have in our environment variables. I'm going to run it in daemon mode. I'm going to give it the name Juke React, and I'm going to run Juke React. Because this is a container and not an image, the names don't conflict. So now we will have a container named Juke React and an image named Juke React. So now I can do sudo docker logs -f follows the log. We're going to follow, and it looks like, oh, it looks like I actually messed up the environment variable. But if I hadn't put an extra S here, that would have fired up, and it would have launched Juke. I'm going to start this rebuilding, but while that builds, I want to say thanks for coming out and viewing this video. As you can tell, this copy does take a little while on larger projects. If I had excluded node modules, this copy would have been a fair bit quicker because there's less to copy in, but our install would have taken quite a long time because this project does have a lot of node modules. There are some tricks you can use to speed up this whole build process. One of them is called Rocker. A lot of those are third-party applications that do interface with the Docker daemon. And a lot of those allow you to do some fancy things with caching and things like that. And let's see if this runs. Okay, now I got this error. That's because the Juke React container already exists. I just have to remove it. And I can run my run command again. And then our logs do show that the server has started. Go back to my browser and change this from 4000 to 1337. And you can see all of the logs that our Juke server displays is all of the URLs and things that get displayed. And our web server is running and successfully gives us Juke. Thanks for coming out and watching this video.